The night Hurricane Helene roared toward Charleston, my husband was planning to die. Not in the ocean, not in my arms, but on paper, like a man writing his own obituary for cash. My name is Eveline Mercer, 62 years old, retired court stenographer, born with a steel spine and a sharp ear. For 38 years, I believed my husband Rowan was a man of honor, a harbor pilot who guided colossal tankers through the black waters of the Atlantic, a man people called the last honest seaman. Turns out, even honest men can drown you in silence. It started on a quiet Tuesday morning. The storm warnings hadn't even hit the news yet. I was searching Rowan's study for property tax documents when something fell from his old nautical atlas, the one wrapped in cracked leather that no one was ever allowed to touch. A folded sheet of paper, creased from years of hiding. On it, in his exact handwriting, Beacon 7, 2340 Helene track AISSOS trigger. I froze. That wasn't a navigation note, that was a schedule. And right beside the map it was a bracelet. A thin cobalt blue glass bangle shimmering faintly in the morning light. Not mine. I hadn't worn bracelets in years. My wrists had grown too delicate for such things. But this one looked new, handmade. The kind they sell on the barrier islands to tourists and lovers. A tremor ran through me, not from age but from instinct. Rowan had started working extra shifts these past months. Late nights, locked devices, a new password on his tablet, always with that same patient tone whenever I asked questions. Eve, the harbor's short on pilots, don't make a fuss. But when you've spent a lifetime transcribing lies in courtrooms, you can hear a falsehood in the silence before it's spoken. That night, while rain slapped against the shutters and the first outer bands of Helene rolled in, I sat alone at our kitchen table with Rowan's iPad. He had this little quirk whenever unlocking it, 2 taps of his index finger, then a swipe. Out of habit, my own fingers mimicked his. The screen blinked open. Rows of transactions stared back at me. Biweekly transfers, clean, quiet, deliberate, wired to Leeward Sound Maritime Trust, Hamilton, Bermuda. My breath caught. This wasn't charity. It was offshore. Then I saw it. A life insurance policy, digital, recent, signed. $2,000,000 maritime accidental death. Beneficiary, the trust. My name wasn't there, not once. My stomach dropped. My husband wasn't preparing for retirement. He was preparing for a disappearance. Lightning flashed outside, casting the kitchen in stark white for an instant. In that flash, everything I'd ignored clicked into place. The secret calls, the locked screens, the way he'd been checking the tide at 11 p.m. He wasn't just planning something, he was timing it. I leaned back in my chair, the house creaking beneath the storm's first gusts. For 38 years, I'd recorded other people's truths in court. Tonight, I opened my old steno pad, uncapped my pen, and began recording my own. "You picked the wrong woman to ghost at sea, Rowan," I whispered to the dark. The storm hadn't even reached the coast yet, but inside me, a different hurricane was already tearing through. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time the wind rattled the windows, I saw that offshore transfer list flash behind my eyes like lightning. Beacon 7, 2340, insurance payout, someone else's bracelet. By dawn, my decision was made. I grabbed my raincoat, a thermos of black coffee, and Rowan's nautical atlas. The return address scribbled in the margins, Kiowa Island, wasn't part of any harbor route, but I knew that coastline like the back of my hand. He'd taken me sailing there on our 10th anniversary. Romantic then, strategic now. The drive out to Kiowa felt endless. Marshland stretched on both sides like silent witnesses. The radio warned. Helene expected to make landfall within 36 hours, coastal evacuations advised. I turned it off. I had my own storm to confront. As the causeway curved, I spotted it through the drizzle. A glasswork studio, glowing like an ember against the gray sky. Blown glass ornaments hung in the windows, blue, green, gold, swaying gently in the wind. And there, hanging on a display rack, was the same cobalt bracelet I'd found in Rowan's study. My heartbeat shifted gears. I pushed open the door. The bell chimed softly, the scent of melted sand and ocean air wrapping around me. At the workbench stood a woman mid-30s, dark hair in a loose braid, apron dusted with glass powder. She turned, and for a moment I saw the face of someone who didn't expect me. "Can I help you?" she asked, friendly but cautious. I forced a smile. "I'm looking for something for my husband. He mentioned a blue bracelet like that one." Her eyes softened. "Oh, that's our harbor collection. It's actually quite popular. Rowan picked one out just like this a few months ago." "Rowan?" She said his name like it belonged to her too. "You know him?" I asked lightly. She laughed, warm, oblivious. "Of course. He's been coming by for years, always at odd hours. Brings fresh coffee, sometimes breakfast for Isla." The name landed like a stone in my chest. "Isla." Before she could answer, a little girl darted in from the back room. 6 years old, curls bouncing, eyes the same gray-blue as Rowan's. She was holding a piece of glass shaped like a wave, laughing. "Mom, look what I made." "Mom," the woman Marisol smiled and knelt down to help the child. My hands gripped my bag so tight the leather squeaked. I should have screamed. I should have confronted her right there. But a lifetime in courtrooms had taught me, you don't interrupt testimony. You let people talk. The truth leaks out all on its own. "How long have you known Rowan?" asked, voice steady. She thought for a moment. "Almost 9 years now. He said he was divorced when we met. Said Charleston was too full of memories. He never brought me to the city, said it was complicated." Divorced, complicated memories. He'd fed her the same curated script he'd written for me, just inverted. Marisol noticed my silence. "Wait, how do you know him?" I met her eyes head on. "I'm his wife." The world didn't shatter. It stopped. Her smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then horror. Isla looked between us, sensing tension without understanding. Marisol whispered. "No," he said it was over years ago." I pulled the folded note from my coat pocket, the one with Beacon 7 and 2340, and slid it across the counter. "Does this look familiar?" She stared at it, then nodded slowly. "He's been talking about a sailing trip, said he needed to check something near the Beacon during the storm." I thought it sounded crazy. I asked to see his last messages to her. She hesitated, then handed over her phone, and there it was. A thread of voice notes and texts, carefully constructed lies timed around his harbor shifts. And one photo, a blueprint, plan drift, a satellite image of the harbor mouth, Beacon 7 circled in red, arrows showing tide directions, and a note, "Once signal triggers, insurance clock starts, 14 min drift window, don't answer calls." I stared at it so long I stopped hearing the rain. This wasn't an affair. This was a plan, a vanishing act. Marisol's hands were shaking now. "Eveline, I swear I didn't know," he said. "I believe you," I cut in, cold but clear, "because he's been lying to both of us." Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling through the marsh grass. The studio lights flickered as Helene's first bands swept over the island. I looked down at Isla, her blue bracelet glinting in the storm light. She smiled at me like I was someone safe. She had no idea she'd just become the center of a storm neither of us started. "We need to talk," I told Marisol, "and we don't have much time." The wind howled through the marsh that afternoon as if even nature was warning us time was running out. Rowan's plan wasn't a fantasy. It was a schedule, and I had just uncovered the clock. Marisol and I sat in the back room of the glass studio, storm shutters locked, the air thick with melted sand and fear. Her hands were trembling. Mine weren't. 30 years in courtrooms had trained them to stay still, even when the ground was splitting. "He's going to fake a maritime accident," I said flatly. "That's what Beacon 7 is. He'll trigger a fake SOS during the hurricane, let the storm cover his tracks, and his insurance will pay out to that trust in Bermuda. Marisol pressed her palms to her forehead. Jesus, he told me he was taking one last run before retiring. I didn't question it. I thought it was romantic. I opened my steno notebook and flipped back through the notes. Transfer amounts, dates, insurance signatures, the fake divorce story. Every line was a nail in his coffin. We're not victims anymore, I said quietly. We're witnesses, and if we move fast, we can anchor him before he slips away. She looked at me, eyes wide. Anchor him how? That night I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Atticus Hale, a financial attorney with the personality of a scalpel, clean, precise, deadly. Eveline, he said, voice calm over the crackle of the storm line, what you're describing is insurance fraud, financial misrepresentation, and electronic forgery. If we act fast, we can freeze his payout before he pulls the trigger. I faxed, emailed, and hand-delivered every document I had. Atticus didn't waste a second. By morning, he'd filed a temporary injunction against the insurance company, blocking the $2 million payout the moment a claim was filed. The second call was to Priya Desai, a field investigator for maritime assurance. Sharp eyes, sharper instincts. She'd sniff out a fraudulent SOS before the Coast Guard even launched. He's planning to fake distress during the hurricane, I told her. Beacon 7, 2340, I want you there. She didn't hesitate. We'll put a response tracker at the beacon. If the signal originates from shore instead of open water, he's done. That's federal time. Exactly what I wanted. By the second day, the plan to stop Rowan was set. Atticus handled the money. Priya handled the signal. I handled Rowan. I combed through his patterns like transcripts, his harbor shifts, eyes, ship tracking, data, weather windows. I could predict him down to the minute. Every lie he'd ever told was now a timeline pinned in my notebook, neat and devastating. Meanwhile, Marisol dug through her phone and studio files. She found old photos, dates, timestamps of Rowan bringing Isla toys, checking the tide, leaving at odd hours. One selfie of him near Beacon 7 in fair weather gave Priya exactly what she needed, coordinates, proof, and motive. We met in the glass studio the night before Helene was due to hit. Rain battered the shutters. The power flickered. And in that stormlit room, 2 women who should have hated each other laid out a plan like a legal ambush. Tomorrow night, I said, tracing the red circle on the harbor map. He'll be here. The beacon. He'll trigger the fake SOS. Insurance thinks he's dead. The trust in Bermuda gets the money. We get left with wreckage. Marisol's jaw clenched. Not anymore. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a legal document Atticus had drafted, a conditional educational trust for Isla. $250,000 from my own separate savings. Marisol's eyes widened. Eveline, why? Because she's a child, I said simply. And this isn't her sin to carry. That was the moment our alliance solidified, not as victims, but as strategists. The storm outside howled. The clock ticked toward Beacon 7, and for the first time since finding that bracelet, I felt steady. Rowan thinks he's setting sail, I whispered. But tomorrow night he walks straight into a trap. Hurricane Helene made landfall at 8:27 p.m. The city of Charleston was already locked down, bridges closed, sirens wailing, waves pounding the piers like fists. But in the chaos, Eveline Mercer moved like a man who'd studied every crack of this harbor his whole life. Because he had. And tonight, he thought the storm would cover his sins. I watched him from the darkened bluff near the harbor mouth. Rain hammered my hood, wind tore at my coat, but my eyes stayed fixed on the narrow waterway leading out to Beacon 7, the red steel tower blinking through sheets of rain. Rowan's pilot boat sliced through the water like a knife. No escort, no radio chatter, just a lone figure in a yellow rain jacket steering toward the mouth of the Atlantic. Behind me, Priya huddled over a tablet inside a weatherproof case. The beacon's signal tracker blinked steadily, waiting. 2340, she shouted over the wind. That's when he'll trigger it. If it comes from the beacon, fine. If it comes from shore, he's done. He'll choose the shore, I yelled back. He always chooses control over risk. Atticus was stationed at the insurance company's emergency line, ready to pounce the moment a death claim hit the system. Marisol was at home with Isla, pretending everything was normal, but her phone was recording, just in case Rowan called her mid-operation. At 23:39 it happened. A shrill electronic SOS ping sliced through the storm like a scream. Priya's tracker lit up red. "There!" she shouted. Signal originated 200 meters inland near Dock 4. Not the beacon. Exactly where I knew he'd be. We scrambled down the embankment toward Dock 4, rain blinding, wind shoving us sideways. Floodlights snapped on. Coast Guard units were already in position, their boats like shadows on the water. And there he was, Rowan Mercer, standing on the dock, soaked but steady, stripping off his rain jacket like a man about to step into a new life. His pilot boat bobbed empty in the current. The beacon light blinked behind him, rhythmic, indifferent. 2 officers approached with flashlights. "Rowan Mercer, step away from the edge." He froze, realizing too late this wasn't an accident scene, it was an ambush. I stepped out from behind the floodlight, hood down, face bare to the rain. For a second, he didn't recognize me. Or maybe he did and just didn't believe I'd be here. "Eve," his voice cracked like the storm shutters back home. I walked closer, the rain hitting my face like needles. "Beacon 7, 2340, insurance, trust in Bermuda. You thought the hurricane would hide you." He blinked, stunned. "How?" "Because unlike you," I said, calm and lethal, "I don't underestimate the woman who took notes on your lies for 38 years. Priya held up the tablet. The screen displayed GPS coordinates, the SOS ping lighting up right where Rowan stood. "Signal came from this dock, Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice carrying over the storm. "That's federal insurance fraud." The Coast Guard officers closed in. Rowan's eyes darted between them and me, searching for some last-ditch escape. "Eveline," he begged, "listen to me." I did listen, I cut in sharply. For almost 4 decades, every pause, every cover story, every fake shift, and now I'm done. The officers cuffed him. The sound of metal locking echoed even over the storm. As they led Rowan toward the waiting boat, a lightning flash lit the entire harbor. For the first time, I saw him not as my husband, but as the man who had tried to erase me with a single beacon ping. Priya leaned closer and murmured, "Nice work, Mrs. Mercer. You just sunk a $2 million scam." I watched his figure disappear into the dark, swallowed by flashing red-blue lights and rain. And for the first time in months, I exhaled. The man who guided ships through storms had finally been caught in one he couldn't navigate. The morning after the storm, Charleston smelled like wet wood, diesel, and new beginnings. The harbor was littered with debris, broken docks, tangled ropes, shattered glass, but the beacon still stood, blinking steadily in the dawn. Rowan wasn't blinking anymore. He was in federal custody. 3 days later, we met in a conference room at the county courthouse. Atticus, Priya, 2 federal agents, Marisol, and I sat around a long oak table. Rowan shuffled in wearing a gray detention jumpsuit, shackles at his ankles. He looked smaller, not just physically, spiritually, like a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. His lawyer tried to paint him as desperate, not criminal. But the evidence said otherwise. The fake SOS signal from Dock 4, the offshore trust in Bermuda, the forged e-consent on our mortgage, 9 years of lies, transfers, and insurance fraud. Rowan pled guilty. He had no other choice. "Mrs. Mercer," the prosecutor said. Given Mr. Mercer's age and cooperation, the federal court recommends a plea agreement, full asset restitution, loss of professional license, and a reduced sentence served under house arrest with medical supervision. Rowan had been diagnosed with stage 2 heart failure weeks earlier. He'd hidden that too. I leaned toward the microphone. I accept the restitution, but I want 2 conditions added to the record. The room went silent. First, I want a notarized, complete financial confession. Every account, every transfer, every lie in writing, no omissions. Rowan's lawyer nodded stiffly. Second, I looked at Rowan. I want you to tell Marisol and Isla the truth yourself. No scripts, no complicated stories, just the truth. You owe her that much. He swallowed hard. I will. For once, no performance, just a broken voice. Over the next 2 weeks, the truth unraveled like a frayed rope. Rowan had hidden $3, $1 million in a shell corporation in Bermuda over 12 years. He forged digital signatures to mortgage our home. He structured payouts to make himself disappear after the SOS trigger. Every dollar was seized and repatriated under court order. The house came back under my name. The insurance policy was voided. Rowan lost his pilot's license, his reputation, his legacy. He spent his remaining months under federal house arrest, not at our house, but a supervised facility by the harbor. Ironically, he could see Beacon 7 from his window. The symbol of his escape became the view from his cage. Marisol and I met one last time at the glass studio. Isla ran up to me, holding a new bracelet she'd made, clear glass with a single golden thread spiraling through. It's called Tidebreaker, she said proudly. It's strong like the ocean after the storm. I smiled. It's beautiful. I'd signed over $250,000 into a legal education trust for Isla, managed independently. It wasn't forgiveness for Rowan, it was protection for her. You didn't have to do that, Marisol said softly. I know, I replied, but she's innocent, and I don't want his lies to be the story she inherits. She hugged me unexpectedly, fiercely. 2 women tied together by one man's deception, now untangling their lives in the sunlight. A year later, the harbor had changed. So had I. I sold the house, bought a small loft on King Street, and turned the downstairs space into a letterpress bookstore, the Tide Room. The shelves smelled of paper and ink, not salt and betrayal. On the first anniversary of the storm, I stood on the balcony with a cup of tea. The sunset painted the harbor gold. Beacon 7 blinked in the distance, steady as ever. My phone buzzed, a photo from Marisol, Isla on her first day of 2nd grade, waving with that Tidebreaker bracelet on her wrist. I smiled. Not the brittle smile of survival, but the quiet smile of someone who won without shouting. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits for the tide to turn.